Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode, I think, 7 of UXR Conversations. A different episode this time because I believe that you, Ashley, are the first non-researcher that I'm hosting on this random YouTube show. So welcome, Ashley. Good to see you. Good to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat about UX research and kind of the relationship with product.
Thank you so much. You also have like the coolest mural on the wall behind you. I really love that. It's getting my creative juices flowing here. In case you've never watched this thing before, I'm Noam Siegel. I'm the director of user research at Wealthfront and the creator of UX Quest. And we are today hosting Ashley Baldwin, who's the director of product at Teachable, which I use, and I've learned several things on Teachable, full disclosure, and I love it. And we're going to talk about a theme today which matters a lot to me, and I just so strongly believe in. This is one of the hills I'm willing to die on, that to teach is to learn. To teach is a privilege, and one of the best ways to grow and to learn about UX research or anything else is to teach it. And maybe you should too, if you're trying to learn some new things. I'm going to introduce Ashley in a second. She's done a few things in her career, but first I'll just say that if you're watching this live, thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd love for you to send them in by commenting on YouTube, and we will take your questions and answer as much as we can and have a conversation. And if you want to learn about more conversations that are happening in the future, please subscribe to this channel for a lot more to come, including next week. I tend to keep these things secret, not because I'm really trying to, but because I just don't have time to kind of share what I'm up to until it's the last minute, as Ashley knows, sadly. And just so you know, and I'll mention this at the end as well, if you want to get in touch with Ashley, then she's at AELL Baldwin on the Twitter, which I love. Perhaps you do too. Teachable are hiring. So go to teachable.com/careers if anything you hear today is interesting. Okay. And by the way, good morning to Pooja and Eli. Thank you for joining us. I'll get started by embarrassing you a bit as I do, well, embarrassing you a bit as I do all of the people who come on. Ashley's done some stuff in her career. She studied computational neuroscience, which is rather fancy, in college, and spent time doing research with children in both the language learning spaces and autism research labs, which is one of many things we share, by the way. You don't know this, but I worked with people with autism in the past as well when I was in undergrad, and they are to me some of the most special people on this planet. After undergrad, you kind of went down the CS route for a while and started a career in project management, consulting for Fortune 500 companies, hospital systems. And then I'd love to talk about this. You happened upon product management. By the way, many UX researchers happen upon UX research as well. When you were going through exercises in a book called How to Find Fulfilling Work, which sounds like a book most of us should read. By an author, I can't pronounce his last name for the life of me. Roman, how do you pronounce his last name?
Oh, that's a good question. I also don't know how I would pronounce that.
It sounds like a Polish name. Anyway, I have no idea how to. We'll link to it in the show notes. But the book's name is How to Find Fulfilling Work, and you realize that product management is a place where you could do the sort of things you want to do, and connect your whys with the goals that you want to achieve. And ever since then, you've been on a mission to work with mission-driven nonprofits and companies. You've worked at DoSomething.org, which is, I didn't know this organization, but you registered 100,000 young people to vote for the 2018 election. Amazing. And Understood.org, helping parents of kids with learning and attention issues. Oh man, I could go on and on. But for the past, is it kind of year and a half or so, you've been at Teachable, which is a platform where you can learn a bunch of different things. I'd love for you to describe it. And you are the director of product there, working on the core kind of offerings for creators. Anyone who's looking to share what they know online, which I know something about and care about. So again, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I'm quite excited to be here and to chat about all of this.
Let's start with that journey for a second. And I think we can maybe skip some things, but I would love to hear more about kind of how to find fulfilling work. So many of us thinking about this. And I actually think that this kind of connects to what you're doing now, because just a few years ago, when people were looking for fulfilling work, they didn't necessarily have all of these platforms and tools to learn about what they even can do. And you were able to find it through this book. Tell us more about that process, and how did you end up finding work that fulfills you?
Yeah, so I found this book specifically to be kind of the best way to enter into exercises, and it's a lot of what our creators do when they like we have a lot of creators on our platform that are creating courses and spaces for the same, answering the same question: how do you find fulfillment in life? But the book was really interesting because it gave a lot of exercises and a lot of introspection into the things that I liked to do and did not like to do, trying to understand the things about my job that I enjoyed, or the things about my job that I didn't necessarily want to continue with. But the most interesting exercise out of the entire book was writing a personal job ad. So what it suggested was to write a personal job ad of all of the things that I liked to do, my hobbies, things that are both work related and not work related, and kind of my characteristics, but to not keep it to myself, to send it out to a bunch of different people from lots of different industries. So they said to send it out to kind of your closest 10 or 20 friends or so that are all across a lot of different spaces, and see what comes back. Because being in the space that you're in a space, you only know the jobs that exist in your area. So I was like, I was very, very well versed in what consulting looked like or what project management looked like, but didn't necessarily know that product management existed. So I sent this email out to a bunch of my close friends, and one of them sent it to their aunt, who was like, I think you're pretty close. Like, you align really well with how my aunt operates and what she likes to do. And it ended up being another product manager, or another leader in product. So that's kind of how I initially found out about product management itself. It's something that a lot of people happen upon. I'm really passionate about kind of helping people understand what product management is, but also helping people build up the skills that you need for product too. It's a really hard position to get into. It's a really hard discipline to kind of convince someone initially that you can do this thing. So something that I'm really excited about is we've been running an Apm program at Teachable now. We just graduated our first Apm to a junior product manager this past week, which is really exciting. But being able to identify folks within our organization that really have the traits to make a really great product manager, have the grit, have kind of everything that we need within our product org, and then figuring out the ways to train them and to teach them. And I've learned so much from kind of that experience. So to teach is to learn is really, it really hits home for me too.
That's awesome. There's so much conversation right now in the UX research community as well about the difficulties of breaking into the field, being early in your career, or even not early in your career, but wanting to transition into UX research. I imagine it's not that much easier, if at all, for product managers. And so I love that you offer that, and that you've been thinking about how to get people into product management. Not to mention, I think I know of quite a few UX researchers who ended up in PM roles and wanted to make that switch. So it's good to hear. I do wonder a couple of things. One, do you still have that ad that you wrote back then?
Yeah, I do. I look at it in my email every once in a while, because it's very interesting to be able to like see how I initially realized that this was a thing, and then I started kind of doing that investigation and introspection to understand what I wanted to do. The other thing that the suggestions, some of the other suggestions in the book that I thought were really interesting were kind of trying, before you make a career switch, really figuring out lower lift ways to try what that looks like before you enter into it. So I did a lot of online courses, or a lot of just like understanding what this space looked like and what product management really meant. And did a little bit of volunteering with nonprofits to kind of understand what it could look like to work as a product manager before I actually made that leap too, which was really helpful in convincing me that this was the right move.
Yeah, those are great tips for anyone thinking about making a transition. My other question was, would you change anything about that ad at this point, now that you've been through a few things in your career, quite a few things? Would anything change there, or would you kind of leave it as is?
Yeah, I think I would probably leave it as is. I think I've stayed pretty true to myself, and the one thing that was the most interesting about that time in my life was really taking a step back and spending a lot of time understanding who I had developed as a person and what I was looking to do, and being able to really take a lot of time, and have that introspection. I think is so incredibly valuable for everyone to do, as they go through their career.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about Teachable and why you joined Teachable, and then we can dive in a little bit to the creator economy and kind of this incredible thing that's happening right now, whereby if you want to teach to learn, you can, because there are so many opportunities to do so, and Teachable is a wonderful one. So how did you get into Teachable? It's quite different from other things you've done in some ways, I would suggest.
Yeah. So I was in nonprofits all before Teachable. And the nonprofit space is very interesting because you're prioritizing product in a very different way. You either have funders, or you have different ways of earning money. And a lot of times your funding comes directly from the same person that pays your paycheck. So being able to listen to the user is a very different, it's very different when they're not paying you. So I really wanted to kind of make that shift and understand what it looked like to operate within a revenue model, and operate within a space that our users at Teachable pay via a subscription. So we work off of a subscription model with our creators, but also they process their payments through Teachable as well. So it allows us to have a really nice balance of not only focusing on acquisition and kind of that early stage for a creator, but really focus on what does it look like for a creator once they've become successful? What does it look like to be able to manage 10 courses, 20 courses, or offer different types of products or package them differently? It gives us a lot of balance when we think about prioritization and goal setting within our teams, so that we can really understand kind of the full life cycle of our creators.
One thing that's come up recently quite a bit in the community, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I recently attended the UXR Conf, the largest and best UX research conference in the world, organized by the UXR Collective. And I ran a lunch session on one of the days with a colleague of mine at Wealthfront, Ryan Anderson. And our session was about UX research and business acumen. Because Ryan and I feel, and he's really an expert at this, much more so than I am, that having that business understanding and that business acumen is incredibly helpful to be a better researcher and obviously a better product manager. I mean, many PMs come from a business background or a technical background or other backgrounds. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, and kind of, you know, since we are mostly speaking here to UX researchers, I imagine, what are your thoughts on learning and developing your business acumen, which you kind of started getting into there? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think really just delving really deep into kind of the motivations behind the business, and also kind of what are the things that can move the needle is really helpful definitely for product development, but especially for as you start to do research and understand what your users are looking for, to be able to kind of read and understand what people are saying, and then translate that into and work with and understand what solutions are viable or something that we want to pursue. But also, like, what does that mean for the business? At the end of the day, we're all here to be able to move our businesses forward and move our organizations forward. So what does it look like when you can marry those things really well? It's a win for the users. It's a win for the business. I feel really, really lucky to be able to work at an organization where our business metrics and kind of what we are working towards as an organization align really, really one-to-one with our creators and with growing their businesses as well. It can be really hard, I think, for user research to be able to align those things when that can be intention. But I definitely feel really lucky that feels very natural for us at Teachable.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm so thankful that that's my experience at Wealthfront as well. Yeah. Sadly, that alignment often does not exist these days, depending on the business model of the company, and I share that with you. I just want to pause for a sec to say thank you to everyone who's joining here, including from Bangkok, Thailand, which is amazing. So hello back to you, EP and Daria and Eli and Pooja and everyone else who's joined. I promise to get to all of your questions before we end this. But first, Ashley, I'd love to hear a little bit about the creator economy as you see it now. Kind of what even do we mean by that? And then I'd love to hear how Teachable, like, what's Teachable's place within this creator economy, and kind of yeah, let's start then, and then we can kind of unpack this notion of teaching to learn. Yeah. So what is the creator economy anyway, and how does Teachable fall into that space?
Yeah, the creator economy is a really interesting thing that has been growing and morphing and changing, it seems, almost daily at this point. But it really is giving anyone the ability, at least from Teachable's perspective, anyone the ability to share what they know. So if you are someone who really has spent a lot of time doing knitting or weaving or learning how to be a UX researcher, how can you get your knowledge out, and how can you start to use the things that you know to be able to share with others and to be able to make a business out of it? It's been really incredible working at Teachable and kind of seeing how folks enter into this space, and seeing how the space has evolved. I mean, even just last year before the pandemic, there were a lot of folks that were doing a lot of in-person coaching and in-person workshops, or let's all go to a retreat for 3 days together, and watching kind of how the pandemic has changed a lot of this, and watching how this world has changed with a lot of people entering into online education for the first time has been incredible. We're also seeing a lot of different types of learning come into and be be really exciting over the past bit. I feel like we see a new entrance into this market pretty regularly at this point, and it's really exciting. It's exciting to see kind of where the creator economy is going, and all of the different ways that you can teach, and all the different ways that you can learn online.
I'm curious to get your take on this. So assuming I know that you and I agree that to teach is to learn. And the reason I believe that, again, to be clear, is that when you sit down and prepare a course, prepare a class, you need to do deep research, right, into the material. You need to reflect on however long your career has been and everything you've done. You need to collect other perspectives and make sure that you're not over-indexing to any particular side, because maybe there are very different perspectives than the one you currently hold. There's just so much you need to do, but ultimately I think it could be packaged into a short phrase, which would be something like just reflection, introspection, and by doing that, you learn so much yourself. But I think for those of us who are listening now or will be watching later, one thing I encounter all the time is that people don't feel that they're ready to teach. I mean, we all have imposter syndrome anyway, and it gets so much worse when we think about not just doing our job, which we often don't feel equipped enough to do, but teaching someone else to do the job. And so most people don't even get to that, I'm not sure what you call it, a teachable, but like very early in the funnel, kind of top of funnel. I don't think I'm ready to teach. I haven't been in this career for long enough. I'm not enough of an expert. I've never taught anything. I've never been an educator, not even in, in the more kind of casual sense of the word. And so teaching is a wonderful mechanism to learn, but most people don't feel like they should be teaching or they can teach. What's your take on that? And kind of, I guess the question is kind of, who can teach? Is it everyone? Do you need specific skills? Who should be thinking about teaching?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see this a lot with a lot of our creators, just how much you have to get through from an emotional perspective to be able to convince yourself that you're ready to teach, to convince yourself that you can build this content. Honestly, I really believe that everyone has the ability to teach, and everyone has something that's worthwhile to share. But it really is kind of getting yourself to the point where you feel like what you have to share is of value. Something that's really interesting that I think I've realized out of a lot of the research that we've done at Teachable with our creators, and kind of what that looks like to go from, I think I have an idea that I want to teach, to actually teaching and then selling it, is a lot of times people start with these like big ideas of like, I want to teach UX research. And they'll start with that as like a very, very large thing. And then it ends up being just either too intimidating to be like such a huge subject. And then if you're thinking about it, it's like, okay, I'm going to teach UX research. It's a big subject that, like, to feel like you are the expert at UX research is a lot. How can you chisel that down a little bit to say, like, I am a UX research expert at online education? Or like, what kind of niche can you use to convince yourself that you're that person, and to really shave out a space for yourself in the world that says, like, this is where I can show up and I can be the most authentic version of myself, and I can feel confident enough that this is where I should be teaching, or this is where I should be giving my expertise.
I love that. I think you'd probably agree with your kind of product expert hat on, that focus is incredibly important for any startup. You need to be focused at first and for a while. And focus is important in education as well. I think, a lot of UX researchers feel pressure to be rock stars and ninjas and unicorns and full stack and mixed methods, and not to develop any particular expertise, but rather have this incredible breadth, which in my view is really impossible to achieve, and it's not a good idea to strive for. And so I couldn't agree more with you that, you need to find your niche. By the way, Americans, it's niche, it's not niche, it's niche. And you need to find your focus, and then you can really do some amazing things if you find that. Let's take some questions from the crowd, because I'm so happy to see the involvement here. Loads of fun questions. Going back to your background, but also on the topic of learning and teaching and self-teaching, Eli's asking about, how did you transition from computational neuroscience to product management? How did you show you had the skills, and what did you need to self-teach? And I would add to that, I'm curious to hear, these days, which is a while after you've made that transition, what opportunities do people like Eli have to learn the skills that you might have had to learn just by yourself from a book or whatnot? These days, platforms like Teachable exist, obviously, so I'd love for you to kind of add that to your answer.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I was really lucky in kind of my transition that I spent a lot of time in neuroscience in college, but then because I had the computational aspect of it, found a space to be able to operate in computer science and project management for tech for tech companies, as a way to get into product management. It can be really hard for project managers to kind of move and make that transition into product, but there are definitely ways to be able to showcase kind of product thinking and showcase the successful launch of projects within project management. So I think I was really, really lucky to have been able to have made kind of that gradual move into product. As far as the things that I needed to self-teach besides project management and being able to navigate like larger, harder stakeholder conversations, was a lot of more of like the strategic decision making that comes with product management, and a lot of the user listening and user focus, and to be able to learn that, I spent a lot of time reading some books and being able to kind of enter into even more like nonprofit or volunteer opportunities before I actually made that switch into product management, so that I could show some projects and be able to give some examples of what that looked like for me, even if I didn't have that skill in an actual job. But I mean, today there are so many different opportunities online to be able to learn these things. What I would definitely suggest is that like there are larger or broader project or product management courses online, lots of different ones, but honing in on things that you think you might specifically need, and being able to take courses that go a little bit deeper are really helpful, especially when you're starting to talk and starting to go a bit deeper into interviews.
Yeah. I'll just say I have to give a shout out to my friend, mentor, and inspiration, a fellow creator and educator, Lenny. Lenny, aka Lenny's newsletter. You may have heard of it. Lenny Wachitsky. He's an amazing product manager, founder, educator, and creator, and he's just giving his course on product management. So shout out to him, and you probably want to follow him among other people to learn about everything to do with product management. And thanks for the question again, Eli. I hope that was helpful. EP, thanks again for joining all the way from Bangkok. You're asking a question which I think maybe I'll take around just the portfolio of a UX researcher trying to land their first job. What are you looking for in a junior candidate who's trying to transition to UX research? I'm not sure this is directly related to our conversation, but I'll just briefly say that portfolios are the #1 question that come from people trying to transition to UX research. And it's really interesting because I struggle to understand where this is coming from. I never ask people for portfolios per se if what you're thinking about when you say that is a website or a PDF, something that's kind of static and generic. What I am looking for from anyone, just junior or early career, by the way, is 2 things. First of all, I'm looking to see how you communicate your research. Therefore, I'm not interested in your website as much as I'm interested in how you tell insight-based stories, how you craft narratives. And I imagine Ashley cares about the same thing when she's interviewing to a certain extent. The second thing is, I very much care about how you relate your work to what we are doing at Wealthfront or Teachable or wherever you're interviewing. That's a big part of the trick for me. And a great storyteller, a great narrative builder can relate any 2 things to each other, even if they seem completely disparate and disconnected. So that's a couple of things, but just because this isn't directly tied to the conversation, if you'd like to email me and talk more about it, then this is where you can find me, and I'd love to help you out a bit more making that transition into UX research. So that's where you can find me. We have a tough one from Pooja, who mentioned she's coming from academia and she's trying to kind of deep dive into tech at a large company and just trying to accommodate all of these new challenges she's facing in a new domain. And she's bringing up a really interesting topic of like unlearning or relearning. A lot of times when we join a new job, our manager will tell us, oh, you have to unlearn everything you studied up until now, which I don't actually love when people do that. Or you have to relearn these things. And she mentions that as a former educator, she likes to have like backups to her backups. And so if you're working in a new domain like AI and machine learning, it can just be very confusing. Where do I start? So I'd love to hear your take, Ashley, on kind of unlearning, relearning. Do the creators you know and work with address these sort of things? And any thoughts you have would be interesting.
Yeah, I think as far as I would agree with you that I don't particularly love the coming into a new job and you have to unlearn or relearn everything. I think everyone brings interesting perspectives into the work that they do, and there's a reason that people are brought into teams. I would say it's less for me the idea of unlearning or relearning as you enter into a new role, but more of like taking a step back and understanding what is needed within the team at the time, or what is needed within the organization, and kind of being a listener at the very beginning. And then from there being able to understand where you fit best. So reframing the question a little bit to less asking how to unlearn and relearn, but to take a step back and to understand the problems that you're trying to solve, or understand the big opportunities within an organization, and figuring out the ways for you to best show up. Yeah, that's kind of how I would think about it.
I love that. I would add that as researchers, we are often so focused on understanding our users, customers, clients, whatever each of you call them in your respective industries, that we forget or neglect to just realize the importance of internal research. right? And understanding our stakeholders, understanding the executive team, understanding the business that we're in, to your point. And focusing on that learning. There's a great book. Have you read it? The First 90 Days. Have you read
Yep,
that book?
it's great.
I really recommend that book for people who are transitioning into a new job, a new industry, moving from UX research to PMing, or PMing to UX research. I've heard of that happening as well here and there. That's a good place to start if you're trying to figure out like how to get into things. I want to ask you, to the extent you can share, I imagine some people watching this want to teach something. Because they want to learn and because they want to share their knowledge. And I imagine they'd love a bit of a head start in the sense of, what insights can you share about, what makes for a great course, what makes for a great teacher or instructor, and any advice you have on how to prepare a course, how to deliver it best. Just what have you learned in your time at Teachable that just works and that could help bring more people into Teachable and past those initial barriers of just worrying about whether I can do this, how do I do this, and so forth. Any good tips?
Yeah. So I think something that came out of our user research over the past year that's been really interesting is seeing how many folks enter into teaching by way of initially like one-on-one mentoring or one-on-one coaching. So being able to actually spend time and understand what works and what doesn't with a lot of different people in a one-on-one basis before you actually make that plunge of creating a course or figuring out what your niche is and actually creating that content. Being able to take the content that you think you're about ready to make the plunge on, but workshopping it together either in a group setting or in a one-on-one setting before you actually spend all of that time to kind of craft it into the way that you want it to be presented in an online course is sometimes the best way to be able to get a really, really strong feedback loop from the folks that would probably pay for your course once you have it ready.
That's great. And I'll just mention that of the many things that didn't exist a few years ago and do now is just some amazing mentorship platforms, some of which I'm part of. Shout out to the amazing people who built and organized UX coffee hours, one of whom is my friend Tejas from Google. And shout out to the amazing organizers and builders of ADP List, Amazing Design People List. If you're looking for mentorship, because clearly, to Ashley's point, it helps get into this amazing creator economy, then that's a good place to start. There aren't yet too many, I would suggest, UX research creators, but I hope there will be many more. I want there to be many more. So you're looking at one of them. Be in touch if you want to be one as well. I would love to help you and guide you as best I can. I'm so happy we have like product related questions. Like it's a good thing. Clearly, I brought on a product leader and not just researchers. Anna has a question. Hi, Noam and Ashley. I always hear people talking about product sense. It seems to be a vague but very important trait. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about what product sense is and how we may learn and train ourselves to have good product sense. So I don't know what product sense is. Do you, Ashley? I hope you can help us here.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really good point. It is a vague, but it's a very important trait. I think if I were to define product sense, it's knowing the amount of things that you need to know to be able to make the best decisions. So being able to kind of like know when you need to pull the trigger. Where I see product teams get into problems is when they either on two different sides of the spectrum is when they either want to create a process around everything. So like I need this this product brief to have X, Y, and Z metric, and I need it to match these 5 OKRs to be able to pull it into our backlog. And really getting into kind of like an analysis paralysis of making decisions, or expecting a process to make a decision for you. There's never going to be a process that's going to make all of your decisions. You really sometimes just need to kind of pull the Band-Aid off and make a decision yourself. Or on the other side, making decisions that maybe weren't as informed as they needed to be, or needed a bit more research, or needed a bit more understanding. And being able to kind of walk through an MVP to an alpha to a beta to a full release, and understanding kind of the decisions that need to be made in each of those phases. As far as learning product sense, I think it really just comes with time, and it comes with doing this work a lot and making a lot of wrong decisions. I feel like most of the decisions that I've made that have taught me the most have been decisions where I've either done way too much analysis and not made the decision that I knew I should have made a month ago, but I didn't make, or I made a decision too quickly and it was the wrong decision, and we had some throwaway work, or we didn't do the right things for the customer, for the user. So it's a really important thing, but it's very, very hard to teach yourself without actually being in the middle of product development with the team.
Yeah, I want to just reiterate one thing you mentioned, which is just like to teach is to learn, to fail is to learn as well.
Yeah.
Failure is a marvelous driver of learning, and I'm stealing this from someone, can't remember who, but learn to fail or fail to learn is what someone smarter than me had once said. And I really believe that. It's an uncomfortable place to be, obviously, and it takes a lot of vulnerability. But I'm really glad you mentioned it, Ashley, because I just think failure is such an important component of learning, and you have to make a bunch of mistakes and go through a bunch of iterations, and that's okay. You should. And I'm sure the creators on Teachable, the educators, the instructors, also make a bunch of mistakes and iterate on their courses until they get them to where they want to be. So thank you, Anna, for that question. I'm glad all of us UX researchers have now learned a little bit more about what product sense actually means. I want to end on Daria's question. It's a good question to kind of end the conversation, because shockingly we are almost at time. Daria's autocorrect failed her, but she's asking about the future of online education and what are the challenges we're facing, specifically when it comes to kids and school online education. But I would obviously love you to also discuss the broader future. What are your thoughts? Where are we going, especially after a crazy year like this and pandemic, and we're all learning from home, and my daughter's downstairs with her cat ear headphones on, listening to her teacher. Where's it going?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're rapidly moving towards this being the norm. I mean, even just 2-3 years ago, teaching a course online felt very on the outskirts. It felt very, it didn't feel mainstream at all. And now you're seeing, I mean, if you were going to go get an accreditation, you had to go to a university. You had to do something through an institution. We're seeing so many folks and so many creators that, like, you can get a certification from anywhere, and sometimes a certification from a professional that's been in the industry for 20 years actually holds a lot more clout than going to get a master's degree or something from a higher education space. And if everything's online, and there's a person that's actually building a business around, let's say, getting an accreditation in UX research, honestly, it's probably a better place to go. I think both higher education and also the folks that are starting businesses online are all going to have to continue to grow and continue to iterate on what this looks like and how to best serve people to be able to get the results that folks are looking for. So it's definitely a really interesting space. I feel like walls are just being broken down all of the time. It's a really cool place to be operating in right now.
And then when you think about children and the public school system, the private school system, online education, I mean, are platforms like Teachable potentially, or other platforms, going to augment public education with additional learnings and classes? I mean, or another example is, my daughter is currently using Duolingo, the kids version of Duolingo, to learn her letters and to learn English. She's in kindergarten, for context, for the record. So what do you think the role of these platforms may be? I know, none of us are prophets, but in your opinion, do you think you may have a role in that type of education as well?
Yeah. I don't think Teachable for anytime soon will have a role in kind of what it looks like for public education, but I definitely, there are so many different small ed techs that are coming up. Duolingo is one, but there are so many other ones that are incredibly niche in specific ways of teaching and specific ways of learning. I think about startups like Vocabulary that are trying to teach kids vocabulary via YouTube videos and via different ways of delivering content to children. I think we're going to continue to see that, especially as hybrid learning becomes more of a norm. I think it's the thing that's been so interesting to me is the idea that kind of a snow day isn't a snow day anymore, or anything like that. Like we will operate in a world where there will be Zoom classes continuing after the pandemic. It'll just be when kids can't actually get into school, and that can be a lot of different things, a lot of different reasons for that.
Yeah. My daughter has way too much vocabulary, way too much. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. Really appreciate it, and I hope we answered you well. It is time to end.
Oh my gosh.
So because it's past 10:15. Ashley, thank you so much. I'm honored that you were the first non-research guest on my random YouTube show. And just a reminder, if you want to get in touch with Ashley and talk about products, talk about the creator economy, education, or importantly, start your career or continue your career at Teachable, that's where you can find her, and I imagine LinkedIn as well. And please do go to teachable.com/careers if you're interested in the multitude of roles they are currently hiring for, because online education is a big thing, in case you haven't noticed.
Oh, yeah.
So check it out. And I'm also in a bunch of places that I always like to mention. uxquest.com is my newsletter, and for those of you who watch, there's even a friendly coupon code that you can use. Obviously, again, subscribe to the channel if you want to get updates. I'm on Clubhouse. Are you on Clubhouse, Ashley? Are you into the whole Clubhouse thing yet? Or
I do have a Clubhouse, but I haven't participated. I don't know how I feel about it quite yet.
Okay, so we can talk about that afterwards, but if you want to join some funny Clubhouse rooms that I host, then that's a thing. And again, if we weren't able to get to your question today, or if you just want to chat about research and research careers or whatever, these are the places you can find me. And so thanks again, Ashley, and we will see all of you next time around, which is at some point next week. I can't even remember when, but don't worry, we'll let you know. Anything else, Ashley? Anything you wanted to mention before we finish?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for this. This is great.
Awesome. My pleasure. Have a nice day, everyone. Stay healthy and safe and be good and have fun. and go get some online education, or even better, go teach. Go teach. It's an amazing thing. You can. You are probably a researcher. You might be a product person since Ashley joined. You are also a teacher. It's somewhere within. There's something you know that you should be sharing with other people. I beg you, go do it. It's going to be an amazing experience for you. You're going to change people's lives. You're going to have fun. You're going to build a business. You're going to make some money potentially. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
See you next time. Bye
See ya.
for now.